The wind howled across the frozen hills, carrying the last whispers of autumn into the barren forests beyond the castle walls. Among the dark silhouettes of twisted trees, a lone figure stumbled forward, her cloak torn and damp. She moved carefully, hands brushing over rough bark and cold stone, listening to every rustle in the shadows. Her name was Ilara, the youngest daughter of House Lorien. She had been born blind, a circumstance her family regarded as both a curse and an embarrassment. Her father, once a man of rigid pride and cunning, had grown cruel with fear. Ilara's presence in the house reminded him of prophecies he did not fully understand and of omens he could not control. "You are a shadow upon this family," he had said that morning, his words sharp as knives. "You bring only misfortune. You are to leave this place. At once. Take nothing but what you can carry." Ilara had felt the sting of those words more than she could have felt a wound. She had known rejection, yes, but never so sharp, so final. Her mother's silence, her sister's quick steps away from her presence, it all echoed in her mind like hollow laughter. But she did not cry. She would not show them the power of her despair. She turned, lifting her face to the cold wind, and stepped into the forest, where shadows and uncertainty awaited her. At first, the darkness seemed complete, threatening to swallow her whole. She could not see. Yet the world spoke in other ways. The crunch of frost beneath her boots, the snap of branches in the distance, even the faint brush of icy air on her cheek all told her where danger might lurk. She had learned to navigate the unseen, to trust her other senses, to listen not only to sound, but to intent. The forest was alive, though silent, and it seemed to watch her as she passed. Hours passed, or perhaps only moments. Time was strange in the forest, and Ilara had long since stopped counting. She found shelter beneath the hollowed trunk of an ancient tree, its roots twisted like the arms of forgotten giants. She pressed herself into the darkness, her breath clouding in the frigid air, feeling the pang of hunger and cold. Her thoughts wandered to the life she had known, the warmth of a fire, the soft voices of her sisters, the sound of her mother humming a lullaby she could never see. Those memories were bittersweet, but they reminded her of what she had lost, and what she might yet find. And then, a presence. She felt it before she heard it. A shift in the forest, as if the shadows themselves had bent toward her. The air grew colder, heavier, yet not hostile, curious. Ilara stiffened, her hand resting on the hilt of a small knife she had carried for protection, though it was more a comfort than a weapon. "Who is there?" Her voice was steady, though her heart raced. A low chuckle responded, resonant and smooth. "You are not what I expected." Ilara's skin prickled. There was power here, immense and ancient, a weight that seemed to bend the trees themselves. She sensed it in the vibrations of the earth, in the pause of the wind. Her instincts told her to flee, to run deeper into the forest where shadows could hide her. But something else, a strange pull. Neither fear nor desire kept her rooted. "Come with me," a voice whispered, calm yet commanding. Ilara's hand tightened around her knife. "Who are you?" "Someone who has watched you for longer than you know," the voice said, closer now. "You do not need to fear the dark, child. Not when it is I who stand before you." Even blind, Ilara could feel the presence before her, a man, a creature. It was impossible to say. He carried a sense of authority older than kingdoms, sharper than the frost that bit her skin. Yet there was a strange warmth beneath the cold, something that made her heart ache with longing she could not name. "Why? Why should I trust you?" she asked, her voice quieter now, uncertain. "Because you have no other choice," the presence replied, and she felt the air move as if a hand had brushed her hair. "And because I see you more clearly than anyone else ever has." Ilara's curiosity battled with her fear. Trust was a luxury she had never known. Yet something about the tone, neither cruel nor mocking, merely steady, made her consider it. The forest stretched endlessly, unforgiving and cold, and she was weary of wandering in shadows that whispered threats she could not confront. "Then I will come," she whispered. The shadow before her shifted, and suddenly she felt arms, strong and careful, lifting her. She did not resist, though her heart raced. The presence guided her through the forest, not merely by path, but by some invisible thread that connected her senses to his will. The world seemed to bend, time slowed, and yet the forest did not feel threatening with him near. At last, they emerged into a clearing. There, partially hidden in the mist, stood a castle unlike any Alara had imagined. Its towers stretched into the sky, dark as onyx, crowned with battlements that gleamed faintly even in the dim light. The walls were carved with intricate runes and symbols she could not understand, yet she felt their magic in her bones. "This is where you will stay," the presence said, his voice echoing slightly in the cold air. "It is not a prison, though you may feel it so. You are safe here. For now." Alara's heart pounded. Safe. From what? From them, the presence said simply, gesturing toward the distant line of trees, where the world of mortals lay. And from yourself, but also, safe to discover who you are meant to become. The words struck her deeply. All her life, she had been defined by weakness, by blindness, by rejection, by the fear of her own family. To hear that she might yet discover power in herself, it was a light in the dark, fragile but undeniable. The gates opened silently before them, as if expecting their arrival. Inside, the castle smelled of stone and old fires, of herbs and metal, of time itself. Alara followed the presence through twisting corridors and echoing halls. She felt the weight of history in every step, the echoes of generations who had walked these paths, the power that thrummed beneath the walls. At last, they stopped in a vast chamber. Candles flickered along the walls, casting tall, dancing shadows. The presence turned to her, and Alara felt the intensity of his gaze. "You may rest here," he said, voice low and deliberate. "Tomorrow, you will begin to learn. There are dangers in the world, and there is power, and you will need both if you wish to survive." Alara hesitated, sensing the magnitude of his words. The world she had known, the fragile, cold reality of her family's home was gone. Here, in the midst of shadows and ancient stone, she was reborn in a strange way. Fear and curiosity twisted together, but she felt a flicker of hope, something she had never allowed herself before. "Will you stay?" she asked, almost afraid of the answer. "I will watch," he replied. "And you will not be alone, though the path ahead is yours to tread." For a moment, silence reigned, broken only by the soft whisper of wind through the high windows. Alara closed her eyes and let herself breathe, letting the darkness around her feel less threatening, even comforting. She did not know who this being truly was, or why he had chosen to intervene in her fate, but she felt something in his presence that she had never felt in the warmth of her family's halls. Safety, yet challenge. Guidance, yet freedom. And yet, even as she allowed herself a rare moment of calm, a small seed of unease took root. This place, magnificent and terrible, was not the world she had known. It was a world of shadows, of power older than life itself, and she could sense that her journey had only just begun. Somewhere deep in the castle, behind walls that had withstood centuries, the presence of the one who had called her here stirred with thoughts of destiny and caution. He had seen many mortals, many weaklings, come and go. But there was something different about Alara, something that would either break her or make her stronger than he could have imagined. As the candles flickered low and the night deepened outside, Alara lay on the cold stone floor, wrapped in a blanket, listening to the whispers of the castle. She had been cast out, abandoned, and left to face the cruelty of her family's world. Yet here she was, guided by a presence as terrifying as it was compelling, standing on the threshold of a destiny she had never imagined. And she knew, deep in her heart, that when dawn came, nothing in her life would ever be the same. Hook. Somewhere in the shadows, the alpha vampire watched her, and a thought crossed his mind. She may survive the night, but will she survive me? Morning came slowly to the castle of shadows, pale light filtering through the tall, arched windows. The stone halls were silent, yet alive with a subtle rhythm, the hum of magic, the shifting of ancient stones, and the faint whisper of the wind through unseen cracks. Elara rose from her blanket, stretching her limbs, her senses alert to every sound, every breath, every movement around her. The castle was vast, unlike anything she had ever imagined. Its corridors twisted like rivers of stone, echoing in ways that seemed almost alive. Each step was a test, each sound a hint of what might lie ahead. Her blind eyes could see nothing, yet she perceived everything, every vibration in the floors, every pulse in the air. A presence approached, silent as a shadow yet commanding in its weight. Kale, the alpha vampire, had been watching her since she awoke. His gaze could pierce the darkness, yet he moved with care, aware of her fragile human form and the power of her keen senses. "You are awake," he said, his voice low, like a melody both soothing and dangerous. "Good. There is much to learn, and you cannot afford to waste the day." Elara tilted her head, sensing the authority behind his words. "I do not even know what I am learning," she said softly. "First, you learn to survive in a world you cannot yet see," Kale replied. "Then, you learn to wield the senses you do possess. You have gifts, Elara, though you may not recognize them. Blindness is not weakness, it is a doorway, if you have courage to step through." Elara's heart stirred at the words. She had always felt limited, trapped in darkness, dependent on the sighted to navigate life. But this was different. Here, in the presence of power older than kingdoms, she felt the possibility of change. They walked together through the castle's halls, Kael guiding her hand along cold stone walls, through corridors lined with tapestries that whispered of ancient battles and forgotten kings. The air was heavy with history and unspoken magic. Shadows shifted as if alive, and Elara could feel them brush past, testing her courage. "Why me?" she asked suddenly. "Why did you help me?" Kale's steps slowed, and for the first time, he hesitated. "Because I have seen many," he said, "and few possess the strength to endure what you have endured. Few are alive to be guided. You are different. You will not bow to fear or pity." Elara sensed more than he spoke. Beneath his authority, there was a flicker of something unexpected, a curiosity, a caution, and perhaps an interest she did not yet understand. Over the next days, Kael began her training, not with swords or weapons, but with perception and awareness. He taught her to read the movements of shadows, to hear intentions in whispered breaths, to sense emotions as vividly as a sighted person could see light. Elara's progress astonished him. Despite her blindness, she learned quickly, adapting to the castle's strange rhythms. She could feel the flick of wings from the night creatures, detect the approach of invisible intruders, even sense the subtle manipulations of spells etched into the walls. Yet the lessons were not without difficulty. Kale was demanding, exacting, and at times cruel in his expectations. She grew frustrated, struggling to master the arts he required. Sometimes, she wanted to flee, to escape into the cold freedom of the forest, rather than endure the intensity of his scrutiny. But every time doubt arose, Kale was there not as a jailer, but as a guide. His presence was at once terrifying and magnetic. When he spoke, she listened. When he touched her hand to correct a movement, his strength was undeniable, yet he was gentle. She found herself drawn to him, not only out of dependence but out of something deeper, something she could not yet name. Late one evening, as the castle was quiet and the wind howled like distant spirits, Kale brought her to the edge of the castle balcony. The night stretched before them, a landscape of silver frost and dark forest. "Do you feel it?" he asked, his voice softer now. "The way the world speaks in shadow and sound?" Elara nodded, her fingers brushing the stone railing. "It is different. I can feel the life beneath the trees, the movement in the dark. It is frightening, but beautiful." Kale's gaze lingered on her. "Good. That is your power, Elara. That is what sets you apart. But power is dangerous. You must learn control, or it will consume you." She looked toward him, sensing something unspoken in his words. He smiled faintly, a shadow of humor in his expression. "I will guide you. But control must come from within. I can only show you the path." Their connection deepened with each lesson. Elara began to understand the subtle dance of authority and trust, of fear and fascination. She realized that Kale was not merely teaching her survival. He was awakening something she had never known existed within herself. And in turn, she was awakening something within him. A long dormant spark of admiration, even respect, for a human who refused to be broken. But danger loomed beyond the castle walls. A rival vampire clan, aware of Kale's growing influence, saw Elara as a vulnerability, a way to undermine him. One night, they struck. Shadows moved through the halls, whispers of steel against stone, the faint scent of blood in the air. Elara's training was put to the test. Alone in the dimly lit corridor, she could hear the subtle shift of feet, the breathing of intruders, the faint hum of their intentions. Heart pounding, she closed her eyes and reached out with her senses, allowing her other abilities to guide her. The first figure moved like smoke, silent and deadly. Elara sidestepped instinctively, using her small dagger not to strike, but to create a barrier, tripping the intruder into a spellbound fall. Another approached, and she sensed its aggression, ducking and weaving as she maneuvered through the hall. Every movement was guided by intuition, every breath calculated. Kale arrived just in time to witness her courage. For the first time, he saw her strength, not as a novelty, but as something formidable. His respect deepened, and with it, an emotion he had long denied himself, an awareness that perhaps he had underestimated the human before him. When the last intruder was driven back or subdued, Kale's eyes met hers. "You have done well," he said quietly. "Far better than I expected." Elara's chest heaved with adrenaline and relief. I was afraid," she admitted, her voice trembling slightly. "And yet you prevailed," he replied. "Fear does not define you, Elara. Courage does." Their eyes, his piercing, hers blind yet full of perception, locked in a moment of silent understanding. Something unspoken passed between them. Admiration, tension, and a connection deeper than words. It was a bond forged in shadow, fear, and the thrill of survival. But just as they allowed themselves a moment of quiet triumph, a new presence stirred at the edge of the castle's magic. A message arrived, carried on a whisper of wind, delicate yet insistent. Elara's father had not abandoned his schemes. He had sought forbidden sorcery, a dark power capable of seizing Kale's territory and destroying anyone who opposed him. Kale's expression darkened. "They have begun to move," he said, his voice low and dangerous. "Your father, your past, will not leave us in peace." Elara swallowed hard, feeling the old fear rise again. The forest, the cold, the rejection, it all seemed to circle back. But now, she had learned something new. She was no longer helpless. She had strength, perception, and the guidance of a being whose power rivaled the very night itself. "I am ready," she whispered, though her voice trembled. Kale stepped closer, placing a hand on her shoulder, a gesture of both protection and acknowledgement. "No, Ilara, you will not face them alone, but the path ahead will challenge you in ways neither of us can yet foresee." As the wind moaned through the castle's towers and the shadows lengthened in every corner, they stood together on the balcony, looking out over a world that had once seemed cruel and unforgiving. Now, that world was alive with danger, magic, and possibility. And in that darkness, a bond had formed, a bond of trust, of power, of unspoken longing. Ilara, once cast out and abandoned, had found not only sanctuary but a guide into a world where fear and courage, shadow and light, life and immortality intertwined. Hook. Far beyond the castle walls, the sorcery of her father moved like a slow, dark tide. And somewhere in the night, whispers of vengeance, betrayal, and forbidden power promised that Ilara's trials were only beginning. The wind had shifted. It no longer whispered through the castle's towers. In gentle murmurs, it now carried a sense of purpose, of warning. Outside, the forest seemed to hold its breath, branches stiff with frost, as if sensing the danger approaching. Ilara stood at the edge of the balcony, feeling the pulse of the castle beneath her feet. Every instinct told her that the trials of her past were converging on her present. Kale appeared silently behind her, his presence as commanding and inevitable as nightfall. "They are coming," he said, voice low, threaded with tension. "Your father has turned to forbidden powers. He does not see you as a daughter. He sees only a weapon to achieve his own ends." Ilara's chest tightened. She had thought of him often since being cast out of the man who had abandoned her to fear and cold. But she had never imagined he would strike not just at her, but at the one who had offered her sanctuary. "What must we do?" John Bermash, she asked. Kale's hand brushed her arm, a touch both firm and protective. "We fight. Together. But this is not only a battle of strength, it is a battle of will, of heart, of understanding. You have grown stronger, Ilara. Tonight, you will see the truth of who you are and who you can become." The castle's great doors opened to a night so black it seemed to swallow even the faint light of the moon. Figures cloaked in shadows moved through the forest, guided by dark spells and ancient malice. Among them, Ilara sensed the unmistakable signature of her father, a presence twisted by fear and ambition, driven by guilt and desperation alike. Kale's eyes narrowed, the full weight of his power radiating outward. "Stay close," he commanded. "Do not falter. Trust your senses. Trust me." The forest erupted into movement as the enemy closed in. Spells lanced through the cold air, striking trees and stones with sparks of unnatural energy. Ilara felt the vibrations through the ground and the pulse of magic in the wind. Her heart raced, yet she did not falter. She moved with awareness, guided not by sight but by the intuition Kale had trained in her. An arrow of shadow flew toward them. Ilara's hand instinctively darted out, not to block, but to sense the motion. And she sidestepped, tripping the figure behind it with a carefully placed foot. Kyle moved beside her, swift and silent, striking with precise force. His power, a torrent that shattered the illusions cast by her father's sorcery. Yet even as the battle raged, Kale's gaze found hers. He saw not fear, but determination, courage that could rival his own centuries of experience. And in that glance, something unspoken passed between them, a recognition of shared purpose, of trust forged in the fires of trial, and a bond deeper than words could capture. Her father emerged at the edge of the clearing, robes dark and twisted with the power he had sought to command. His face was pale with obsession, eyes wide with the desperation of a man who had lost everything, yet sought dominion over all. "Elara," he spat, his voice trembling. "You are mine. You will obey me." Elara's heart ached not with fear, but with sorrow. The man who had abandoned her, who had cast her into the forest as if she were nothing, now demanded allegiance. She did not move forward in anger, but in clarity. "You are wrong," she said calmly, her voice carrying across the clearing. "I belong to no one, and I will not let your fear rule me or anyone else." Her words carried a power she had not yet known she possessed. The magic her father wielded faltered, sensing the strength within her. Kale stepped closer, his hand brushing hers in reassurance, and Elara felt the energy of their combined presence hum in the night air. Together, they were a force neither mortal nor immortal could easily oppose. The duel began in earnest. Dark spells clashed with shadow and steel, sparks flying from the clash of intent. Elara moved with precise awareness, anticipating each attack, redirecting the energy of the forest around her. Kale's strength complemented hers, flowing in rhythm with her intuition, a dance of light and shadow. Yet the greatest battle was not against her father, nor the dark magics he wielded. It was the battle within herself, between doubt and courage, between the fear of failure and the certainty of purpose. She felt the weight of all the years she had spent in rejection, the loneliness, the whispers of inadequacy. But in this moment, standing beside Kale, she realized that those years had forged her, had sharpened her senses and her heart. She would not falter. She would not be broken again. With a final surge of clarity and force, Elara channeled the energy around her not as a weapon, but as a shield of light and perception. Her father's spells recoiled, unable to penetrate her focus and will. Kale moved beside her, striking a final blow that dispelled the last vestiges of the dark magic. The clearing fell silent, save for the wind and the soft exhale of the forest. Her father fell to his knees, exhausted, defeated not by Kale's strength alone, but by the unity of their wills and the undeniable power that Elara had discovered within herself. She approached him, her steps measured, her voice steady. "This ends now. You may not rule through fear, nor cast darkness over life. Leave, and never return." He looked at her, the remnants of love and regret flickering in his eyes. I failed you," he whispered. And in that admission, Elara felt a small, fragile mercy bloom within her. She did not rejoice in his defeat, but allowed him the chance for redemption, should he seek it in the years to come. The night grew quiet, and the frost began to melt with the first hint of dawn. Kael turned to her, his expression unreadable, yet his eyes held a warmth reserved for those rare few he trusted completely. "You have done more than survive," he said. "You have become something extraordinary. And in doing so, you have not only saved yourself, you have saved us both." Elara looked up at him, sensing not just his words but his intent, the depth of his admiration, the faint stirrings of an emotion that mirrored her own. I could not have done it alone," she admitted. "No," Kale replied, his voice low and steady. "You could not have. But together, we have learned something that neither of us knew we needed. Trust, courage, and perhaps," his voice softened, almost reluctantly, "perhaps even hope." Elara felt the warmth of his presence, and for the first time in her life, she allowed herself to feel whole. She was no longer a blind, cast-out girl, wandering in fear. She was a survivor, a force to be reckoned with, and a being capable of shaping her own destiny. They walked back through the castle together, the weight of night and battle lingering in the stone corridors. Shadows no longer whispered with threat, but with recognition, acknowledgement of a human who had defied fate and a vampire who had discovered something he thought lost to eternity. In the quiet of Kale's chamber, the flickering candlelight cast long shadows across the walls. Elara seated herself on a stone bench, listening to the distant hum of the castle and the rhythm of Kale's presence beside her. For the first time, she felt the possibility of peace. "You have changed," Kale said softly, "not only in strength, but in heart. I respect you more than I have respected any being in centuries." Elara felt a flutter she could not name, a mixture of pride, relief, and something deeper, an unspoken bond that went beyond mentor and student, beyond protector and ward. "And you," she replied quietly, "have shown me that even in darkness, there can be light. Even in fear, there can be trust." Kale's hand brushed hers, a fleeting touch filled with meaning, and in that simple gesture, they both understood that their connection had deepened. They were no longer simply teacher and pupil, or creature and human. They were allies, partners, bound by trials, by courage, and by the quiet stirrings of emotion neither had dared to name until now. Outside, the forest stirred with the first rays of sunlight, the frost glinting like scattered diamonds. The darkness that had once seemed so oppressive had receded, replaced by a world alive with possibility. Yet the castle remained a place of shadows, of secrets, and of untold power reminders that their journey was not yet complete. Elara stood at the edge of the balcony once more, sensing the wind, the forest, the distant movements of life beyond the castle walls. Kale came to her side, silent, his presence grounding her. "Whatever comes," he murmured, "we face it together. You will not be alone again." Elara felt a calm she had never known, tempered with the knowledge that challenges still lay ahead. She had been cast out, abandoned, and tested by fate, but she had survived. And in the process, she had discovered not only her own strength, but the possibility of love, of connection, and of redemption not just for herself, but for the world around her. For the first time, she lifted her face to the sky and allowed herself to smile. The darkness had not claimed her. The shadows had not broken her. And by her side stood a being who had once been feared by all, now humbled and awakened by the courage of a human heart. Hook ending. As the sun rose, casting its first light over frost and forest, Elara sensed that this victory was only the beginning. The world was vast, full of danger, magic, and unspoken mysteries, and for the first time, she knew she was ready. And Kale, silent and watchful beside her, understood that their story, their bond, and their destiny had only just begun.